Tottenham Hotspur 1, Aston Villa 2, and Villa into the top 4. Spurs drop out. Shaka Hislop alongside me to discuss. This game was brilliant. It was just glorious chaos, wasn't it?
It certainly was. You read that scoreline there, and in truth, it could have been 2-1 after 3 minutes. It could have been 2-1 in Spurs' favour after 3 minutes. It was very open. Listen, I really sympathise with Spurs and couldn't be more impressed with the job that Postecoglou is doing. They have untold injuries as we know, but their style doesn't change, and I think they can probably see themselves as unlucky. Give them some of the chances. Give them 3 disallowed goals for Heung-min Son. All of them rightly disallowed. All of them very narrow offsides. But then on the other side of that same coin, Unai Emery and his adjustments at halftime that brought Villa up. The goal at the very end in injury time of the first half got them back in the game. But I thought the adjustments of Tielemans and Bailey coming on at halftime won Villa the game. Contrast that with Postecoglou having to go to his bench. Gil, who was outstanding in the first half, having to come off. Bentancur having to come off. Højbjerg and Skip coming on. Not necessarily same quality replacements in a squad that, as I mentioned, was already weakened due to injuries. That for me was telling. But even so, if you're Spurs, you're still kind of half wondering, how did we lose that?
Yeah, there's so many ways you could go with this game. One thing I want to talk about is the credit that Unai Emery gets, and is it enough? Because that's them into the top 4. And I can't remember who it was, but there was a discussion over the past couple of days. Someone said, oh, if Emery was still in charge of Arsenal, they would have won the Premier League last year. Basically, the point being that, and you and I know, we've covered La Liga long enough, this is a manager that is really good at his job. And he's come up against a fellow tactician in Ange Postecoglou, and ultimately he's got the better of him today. And it's very impressive what he's doing at Villa.
Very, very impressive, especially when you consider the resources or lack of when you compare what Villa are willing to spend to the rest of the top 4. And not just in terms of getting results. And while, yes, ultimately you're judged by points on the table, but the football that Villa is playing really is outstanding. The progress of Ollie Watkins as a striker, I think you put that down to the coach. And then to answer your first question, Mark, no, I don't think he's getting enough credit. And maybe that is to do with his time at Arsenal, where I think people still look back on that and think that it could have been better. But that being said, if you're a Villa fan, if you're Unai Emery, that's in the rearview mirror, a long, long way in the rearview mirror. You just can't be happier with the job that he's doing. And if you're Unai Emery, clearly you found a home. Clearly you found a dressing room that's buying into everything you're selling, and the results are coming as a result.
I think what we have seen over maybe the last 3 weeks of Spurs, and yes, there have been defeats after an unbeaten start to the season, their first 11 is very good.
Yes.
Underneath that, it needs strengthened a heck of a lot. You're playing 4 fullbacks today. Now, 2 of them ultimately were basically wingers, but you're also playing 2 fullbacks as centre-backs. That tells you with a centre-back on the bench in Eric Dyer, who he doesn't trust to be better than a fullback, that he's surplus to requirements as well. So what needs done for Ange Postecoglou to ensure his squad is stronger come the second half of the season?
Well, you touched on it there, Mark, and I think it comes down to the January transfer window, who he's able to bring in. But as you say, when you have a starting 11 that's as good as Spurs is, it's a difficult sell to say to somebody, well, come join us. When everybody's fit, you'll be on the bench. But, you know, you'll get an opportunity, and those players being an upgrade on what you're able to call on now. So that's a balancing act, and that's part of the man management of being a manager of a football club. How do you convince those players to come in under those circumstances? But you're right. As a starting 11, I think Spurs have been simply outstanding. They just don't have the depth. All that being said, before a ball was kicked this season, I would have said Spurs 8th would be about right, somewhere around there. Given their finish of last season, given the fact that you lose Harry Kane in the summer, to all of a sudden be having a conversation around whether Spurs can finish top four even before these injuries, I think speaks to Postecoglou, the job that he's doing, and to that point, even with those injuries, Spurs haven't changed their style. They're still playing that high pressing, high defensive line that brought so much success. Maybe it's not giving rewards right now in the short term, but I think long term, it's exactly what Spurs will need. It's exactly how you build a successful franchise.
Got a few pals that are Spurs fans. They're loving it. I mean, I know that they lost at Wolves and they were beaten by Chelsea, but it's the style of play that Ange Postecoglou's come in. And you say they've not changed. He's not changed. It's what he did in Japan. It's what he did with Australia. It's what he did with Celtic. And he's been a breath of fresh air for the Premier League, Ange Postecoglou, hasn't he?
He really has, in so many ways, in how he's managed this great club that, in my opinion, have been underperforming over recent seasons. Even with the departures, as I mentioned, he just was unfazed and decided this is who Spurs are going to be. And he's had to adjust and move players around. At one point, Richarlison was playing as a left wing. He's got Heung-min Son playing up through the middle and doing so wonderfully well. And then young Johnson continues to improve. And Kulusevski, we've always kind of known how good he is, but I just feel that, again, his game has risen a touch. And that speaks to, one, his man management, his understanding of the game and understanding of personalities and how to get the best out of them, even when it may not be that obvious to you and I, Mark. And then his honesty in speaking to the press and how he comes across. It really is a lot to admire from Postecoglou.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this up shortly, but if I was to say Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, in whichever order, will be in the top three, there's only one Champions League spot. So Villa are up to fourth, Spurs, Newcastle, Man United, and maybe Brighton as well. Who do you like long-term to maybe be the strongest of those competing, if it is just one spot available for that fourth spot?
Long term, I like Newcastle if they're able to stay clear of injury problems. And still, you saw in the performance yesterday against Chelsea, despite having some injury problems and having to play the 18-year-old, when Alexander Isak is on the park, everything about Newcastle just has a very different look. And that's no disrespect to Callum Wilson, who are a player I absolutely love, but he has a different skill set. But I just feel that if Isak stays fit, you'll see Newcastle. I think, for me, Newcastle finish top four. That being said, again, against a Spurs team, and yes, as I've mentioned, the caveat, Spurs have injuries and are struggling to cope with them. Certainly, losing the last three suggests as much. Villa are a good team. Goodness me, Unai Emery has them playing some incredible football. And again, his adjustments at halftime, given the fact that the likes of Leon Bailey is just coming back from two difficult games for Jamaica against Canada and maybe didn't want to start him, and how he was able to make that adjustment at halftime that ultimately won Villa the game. If you're a Villa fan, you think top four is there for you. I'm more of a Newcastle fan, so I'm thinking the other way.